Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Get Real show. We are here with Gabby,
Hi.
who we've known each other for quite some time at this point.
Yeah, we have.
But I feel like since we have met, we've both been on quite the journey. And really excited to just sit down with you and learn about everything you've been doing the past couple of years because it's been a lot. But I definitely would love to start off with really the beginning of your mental health journey. So
Yeah.
really going back to childhood or early teenage years, anything of that sort. I know that you did have some struggles throughout that time.
Yeah.
And really find out what that looked like and how that impacted who you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia in pretty a conservative household. And I think the environment that I was in and also the different schools that I went to, there was, for me and how I felt, I didn't feel in control of myself. Like I felt like everything was already dictated for my future, who I was supposed to be. And I felt out of control within myself. And, going to an all-girls high school, there was a lot of, I think, pressure. And I think, like, this stereotypical, like, how a woman should look and even how a young teenage girl should look with, a man that starts at a young age. And I think that was really, like, brought into the culture and the environment that I was in. And I started to feel that pressure. And I was also doing sports, and I was going to go to college for sports as well. So that was extra pressure on me. So I turned to food, which I felt like was the only control that I had over my life. And so I developed, a really bad eating disorder that led me to the hospital. And there was a moment that I won't forget, that I was in the hospital where I was quite like chained to a bed in a sense. I wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom because that was considered exercise. And I felt like, how could I just be laying in here with no option to move, no option to watch TV or go on the computer because I had no control. And I remember being like, I never want to not have control of myself and my life ever again. I never want somebody else to dictate that for me. But I think back, like, when I had that eating disorder, it's definitely a mental. It's all mental. It's not the physical. And I think for me, the help that I got was more physical rather than mental. So I really relapsed in a lot of different stages. And I think, as I got older and went to university and was introduced to drugs and alcohol, I became obsessed.
Yeah.
It was the only escape for me. And I felt like when I was so angry. I had so much anger and resentment of my life, and at such a young age, I felt like my artistic self was suppressed, and I don't think I was living my authentic truth. And I feel like I was drinking and doing drugs to escape. And not only to escape, but more so just I look back on it now, and I almost feel like sometimes we resort to partying and drinking as a kind of outlet of creativity, because we're so used to kind of being in one direction of, you know, whatever kind of work we're doing, and we're like waiting for the weekend, and we want to do something fun, and that's kind of like this social construct that we live in, like on this earth. It's like, oh, let's go out and party, and I think we lose touch with the essence of who we are, which is like, we are creators, we are makers, and we're meant to use the essence of all of our artistic abilities. And I think that is quite lost in a society that loses and doesn't remember who they are inside. So yeah, I feel like once I continued on this journey of drinking, I became aggressively more aggressive. Like, I would drink to black out, and I started drinking alone, like before I would go to work or before class, and that's when I realized I was numbing something. I was like numbing some kind of pain. And I remember it was actually, I was in a relationship, and I think sometimes we need something to break us. We need to hit rock bottom.
Oh yeah.
Multiple times in order to kind of wake up. And I kept hitting rock bottom, but I wasn't waking up. And you know, I wound up getting into a relationship, and like deeply fell in love with this person, but it was super abusive, and I was reliving, you know, childhood and parental traumas that I had in this relationship, and I noticed my eating disorder came back. I was getting severe anxiety. I was on all different medications and drinking, because that's what this person who I was with was all about as well. And also, I surrounded myself with people that were doing the same thing. Yeah. And I was surrounding myself with people that were just partying and drinking, and really not in the mindset of, I want to do things, like real life things. Yeah. And so, you know, it feels so cliche to say it, but and it feels weird to say, but like that breakup was the thing that woke me up. I don't know, it was the most traumatizing thing that I've ever experienced, other than everything I have done, but I think like once we go through something that really hits the gut of our core, or the gut of our heart, it just explodes. Yeah. And I think I then started to go to Reiki school, and I started to really get back into, I changed my major. I was a business major, and I was like, this is not what I want. I want to do fashion design, and I want to do art. Like, that's who I am. And so I started to find people that were alike. And I also then started to go to yoga teacher training. But I think regardless of all the things that I'm saying, I think one of the big things was I hated myself. I hated myself. I did not, it doesn't matter, and I'm thinking about it now, it doesn't matter like what my past or what I was doing, I did not like myself. And I couldn't gain confidence in anything I was doing except for the way I looked.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only way that I felt worthy.
Yes.
Of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was looking for validation and gratification from men based on how hard I was working on my body.
Yes.
And I think that has been an evolution for me, is to really, really love myself and to really work on eating in a proper way. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
100%.
It doesn't have to be like the smallest thing, but we're taking different kinds of Adderalls and stimulants, and our nervous system is riddled with anxiety. We're in constant fight, flight, or freeze mode. There's all these like parts that kind of subside from eating, and there's also like the opposite, which is emotional eating, and I've gone through both binge eating and having anorexia. But I think, as life progresses, my essence and how I love myself has changed. And I think the biggest thing that I've been going through is this kind of, I wouldn't say it's a battle, but I always have this kind of deep knowing or wanting to learn more about myself, seeking the truth, seeking like, why am I here? And I guess people could call it the spiritual path, but for me it's more about remembering. And I also have this like deep dark side of all of the art that I've created within the last 4 or 5 years has been super dark, super heavy. I've been like 12 different people, and like you see that. I've like had a shaved head with horns. Like I've like everything I created was just full of blood and hearts, and like I would buy like anatomical hearts, and then like, but my soul needed that darkness and that depth of complexity, and our souls need that in order to revolutionize, because it's quite like, you can be on a spiritual path or be in this angelic state, but that's not really what we're meant to do, or else we're like souls in these meat suits. And like as human beings, we're meant to live and go through feelings and go through this roller coaster, this ebb and flow of the waves. There's something erotic about when a wave is coming up and it's crashing down. It's like this masculine and feminine energy that we carry within ourselves. So it's like this ebb and flow of life, and feeling this deep sadness, but also feeling like beautiful. That's the part of it. And I feel like I had to go through and really express myself outwardly and inwardly in order to get where I am today. And that came with judgment, I don't like when people don't like me. Like,
I think that's natural.
It's natural. And I don't like when people are making fun of me or, judging me based on my appearance, but I had to accept that because it's who I was at the time. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to go through. And when I was, I had moved to London because I had this dream of becoming the next McQueen and going to fashion design school. And I worked really hard to get there. And when I got there, I kind of backtracked, and the pressure was so intense. I was having chronic nosebleeds. I was throwing up blood every day. I wasn't sleeping. All I was doing was working. I was it was like, and I kept being like, because I worked hard on myself, up until this point. I was looking around at the people around me, and I was like, I don't think I can mentally do this anymore. Like, I have no capacity to harm myself in order to achieve my dreams. And I think that's something that we are kind of striving to do as people, as a society. Like, we think we need to kill ourselves in order to live a fulfilled life. And so, I left, and I was like, I'm never doing art or fashion again. I was like, there's gotta be a better way.
Yeah.
'Cause I working in New York too, like, and then coming to Philly and having my own business, everything felt right, but not quite right. And there's always this piece of I think for me there's a straddle between finding a family and community, always being in touch with nature, and just being in flow.
Yeah.
Creative flow. And I think finding that balance has always been hard for me. And so I wound up traveling a bit after London, and the places that I'd went to, I was attracted to places that were super simple. Like, I was just following my heart. And one of my favorite places was actually Baleal in Portugal. Do you know Nazaré, like the 100-Foot Wave documentary? Yeah. So it's about 30 minutes from there.
Wow.
And I wound up staying there for a month and surfing every day. It was, I've never been to a more, it quite reminded me of Ocean City a bit. But there was something about, like, the people there and how people created art. And it reminded me in Lisbon too, in Portugal, and in Italy as well. People were just living their life in such simplicity, and they were creating art from the elements that they had around them and how they grew up, and that was quite literally it. And there was an essence that I loved about that I was like, there's something here. Like, I want to bring that back with me. And when I came back to Philly, one of my dear friends who had taught me yoga when I did my yoga teacher training, she said, Gabby, I think you need to come to Peru with me. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I just got back from the most intense experience. And she did this healing work on me, and I was in a meditation, and I got a download that was like, you need to go to Peru. And so I packed my bags. I went to Peru. I wound up doing a 300-hour yoga training that specialized in shamanic awakening and healing. And I wound up working with ayahuasca and washuma, and completely had like one of the most powerful experiences that I ever had in my whole life. And while I was on drinking ayahuasca is considered the grandmother And Washuma is considered the grandfather. Both are two different plants. One is a vine and one is a cactus. And what I found from ayahuasca was this whole thing that I had mentioned about control.
Yeah.
She started to wrap her vines around me, and she says, like, you need to let go. And there was this feeling of and my heart just burst open saying that, because imagine, like, we love to be in control of ourselves.
Yeah.
And imagine something that you don't have control over taking over you.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. And I literally was like, I don't want this. And what had happened was, because I couldn't let go, I had to cleanse my whole body of every trauma, anything that anyone's ever said to me. And I remember just like purging and hearing all of the things like come out. And I had wound up staying in Peru. I got like a very strong message that I needed to stay. So I wound up staying there for a couple months and going on a pilgrimage and living and working with different shamans and medicine healers and women who I'm so eternally grateful for, because I think one of the biggest things is those people, although they're teachers and healers, and it's something that I am as well, it's not about teaching. It's more about holding space for people to remember who they are. And, you know, as human beings, we don't feel safe. And a lot of us have different traumas from our past, and we feel so scared. And so we're in this constant, as I said, like fight, flight, or freeze. And we have this ability within ourselves. We have so much power and force, but when that's suppressed, or we don't feel nurtured or loved by whoever our caretakers are, and we don't feel safe enough to express ourselves, that's going to be pushed down all the way. And when I was in Peru, I finally felt safe enough to be able to be vulnerable, to let go, to be and work with this medicine. And it's holding space for another person to be able to be who they are. And that's what I was able to do there. And I got so much back in touch with myself and who I am as a person, as a soul, what I came here to do. And I had worked quite a lot with Washuma, and he's more of the grandfather, abuelo. And he taught me so much, and I am so grateful for him. And when I would go into these mountains, you know, as I said, like, I was from a super conservative family, and that's okay though, because I don't resent. I love my family. I love my dad. I love my mom. And they actually taught me so much. At the time, I couldn't see it, and I resented them. But I think there's this essence that, you know, we have some type of resentment from our caretakers or whoever we were raised by. But I feel like there's this full circle moment of they tried the best that they could. And I feel very, very grateful for that, because it's almost like a full rebirth moment.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I'm sure you've had that experience as well, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, every single thing you said from start to finish.
I'm talking.
No. Everything was like, I just feel like we've gone on the exact same journey in totally different ways.
Yes.
But everything you said, just, I feel like I've experienced in some capacity.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing because we haven't even caught up in a bit now.
I know.
And I feel like our last step, we both kind of have been going through that healing at the very end.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the journey I've been on the past year or two.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely. I mean, from the beginning, the eating disorders, the trying to get male validation, hating myself, and trying to get the approval of men and get validation through my body, through how I looked like, how I presented myself. That was exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
And then totally relate to even, I mean, in the end, I went to an eating disorder and alcohol co-occurring disorder rehab that did help me. But before that, I went to a different place that really didn't help. And I think that I've talked about it before, like, they do exactly what you said, how a lot of times they try to fix the physical instead of the mental aspect of it. Is exactly what I experienced. And before I went to the other rehab, I was just in a hospital wing, and there's so much, even I think I black out or don't even I try not to remember even parts of that, like how out of control you are there. And I know you have to be, but I mean, thinking about you're woken up at like 4 a.m. and stripped down and weighed and vitals taken, you're in a hospital gown, like it's a lot more intense than I think I've ever even really like opened up and shared. And the experiences there are really crazy. But for me, it wasn't about the physical, it was about like the mental, and that's really what it is for everyone. So I think redirecting, focusing on healing people rather than, like, a lot of people around me, it wasn't their first, second, third, fourth, fifth time getting help. It, like, they were people that were in the system for years, and it's clearly because it's not working. And I think sometimes it's like, follow the money. They don't really want you to get to a place where you're actually not needing it. Not about my last place, but definitely about some of the systems. Like, some of the girls had been in the system for 5 years plus.
For sure.
Which is insanity.
It's so, I remember going in, I did an outpatient and inpatient, and then I was in the hospital. I remember I was 17, and there were women that were like 60, and they've been going there for like 30 years. And I remember being like, I never want to be these people. But there is this type of, I think, you know, addiction and attachment that we sometimes get into, where we place, like, I have anxiety, I have bipolar, I have depression, I have anorexia. Like, we place these attachments or identities on ourselves that almost like tweak our brain into thinking we have these issues, which, yes, like, we do, but it's more so about and definitely what I've learned, like, while working with Washuma, it's more about this energetic misalignment that we have with ourselves, which is, in essence, not fully being who we are. And so much of it has to do with our environment and how we were raised. That's a huge, and because we're on a similar journey, we were raised and had totally different environments, so we're on different paths, but we've had the same kind of emotional, like, traumas, and we've had these, like, ways to control ourselves that are very similar.
Yeah.
But you had a point there which I thought was interesting, in coming back to Philly now with quite a different perspective of where I've been. Like, coming back from London to Philly was a totally different experience. Coming back from Peru to Philly has been a totally different experience. And I've been in Philly for a couple months now, which has been the longest in like a couple years. But coming back, and I want to know if this is something that you've experienced in your environment. You know, I'm from South Philly, which is quite, I love it. I love it. I love my people. I love my family there. You know, they all know. But there's a culture there. There's definitely a culture there. And it is about, you know, a lot of the people from South Philly come from Italy, but there is this essence of, you know, kind of like the macho man and having a beautiful wife and, you know, becoming rich and kind of flaunting it. And there's this essence of like a woman as being viewed almost like, I don't want to say like a piece of meat, but sometimes it had just felt like that. And I want to know if like your environment has led you felt like that when you were younger.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I grew up in a small town,
Yeah.
obviously. You know it. But I think the experience would be similar in any small town.
Right.
That if you make yourself attractive, you try to put on a persona, that then you can become somebody and you can get in the right circles and and all of that. So I definitely think that plays a part, but I think it's just the culture altogether. That is how you get quick attention. And I definitely had many, many, many different stages, especially with my eating disorders, where I kept seeking that male validation and that attention. And years into being sober and being in eating disorder recovery, I still wasn't healed from that. It wasn't until the past couple years, like very recent, I would say the past 2 years, that I have escaped that. Because I think like I was trying to achieve this super, super thin body with my initial eating disorder because that was what I thought I was supposed to achieve. And then I came back one year and I was in recovery, but I was still having like binges. And I was a little bit bigger and I had more of like a womanly figure. And then I was getting attention for that. So I was insecure about the fact that I was bigger now and that I was capitalizing then on the fact that, oh, I can get attention for having more of a womanly figure. I can still get validation through my body, through Instagram, through likes, through external validation, if I just now really like sell this, essentially. So I was doing that. And then at the end of all of that, I just felt completely empty and like I was still putting myself in this pattern where I would then attract obviously the wrong people because of what I was putting of myself out into the world. And then that's how you create like a victim mentality, because then you're like, how do I keep having these same people? Why does nobody actually like me? Why doesn't anyone really see me for who I am? And it's like, because I'm not putting who I am into the universe, I'm putting this altered version of myself, selling myself in the way that I think other people want to see me. And then I'm wondering why nobody sees who I am, but I'm not being who I am. So I definitely experienced that. And then now today, I really think one of the major shifts was moving to New York and stripping away all prior versions of myself, my Ocean City version, my Philadelphia version, and just being like getting to start from ground zero and getting to meet people and have them judge me on who I am today. then I started presenting myself in a way that this is actually who I am, and I'm not looking for external validation. This is who I am, and I love myself now. And that is when it majorly shifted. And when I actually formulated good connections, I met great friends. I mean, obviously I have amazing friends from other points of my life, but I'm just saying overall in my community here, I feel more like myself,
right?
Because I was able to come into it being myself from the start, from the get-go,
right?
And I think in the end it all comes down to self-love, and if you don't have that, you really can't be yourself, and then be okay with people saying negative things about you, because that is part of the process. I think for sure,
right? I think it's such a good point, because I think, one, it's like, what as a society is attractive? What is attractiveness? We put that kind of connotation into the world of what attractiveness is. But I think what you just said, it really resonated with me, because I think when you go to a different place, like when I was in London, when I was in Peru, when I was traveling, you just can show up as yourself without the old versions of you. And I think coming back to Philly has been a bit difficult, because I am this totally new, I would say new person, but it's still me. And kind of reliving different elements of my past and different elements of how people are. It's quite triggering, but it's also I'm learning about how to love myself even more, and how to be grounded and rooted in myself even more so, because it doesn't matter what anybody says or does. It's how you respond to it. It's how you react. And, say like when I was 17 and someone said something to me, maybe I would have went on a rampage, and maybe now that same person says that to me, or a different person says something to me. I have all of these new tools now in order to respond into a different way. So it's like, as life goes on, and we build that inner strength within ourselves, those things start to fade away. And but I think being a woman in a society that has been so male dominated, and ancestrally too, and I think that's a big thing that I learned while drinking the medicine, is prayer, offering, and honoring my ancestors. And that goes back into every single way. And the ancestor part is so big in every element, because like we're just kind of talking about right now, we all have come from a tribe. Like, I'm talking like, your family is not originally from Ocean City.
No.
So I'm assuming definitely
like 200
not.
years ago, I think it was just cows there. So definitely not.
So, our ancestors traveled on boats. My family were chestnut farmers. Truly not even making a living, just planting and raising chestnuts to eat, and maybe making, I don't know, a penny. And they took the risk to come to America, which is so, if you think about it, so scary. Not having any money, hearing about this other land, and then just saying, oh, I'm going to get on a boat. The amount of like fearlessness, courage, strength, and then coming to America and making something of themselves. That takes guts. That takes resilience. And the same thing that you're doing when you came to New York is the same thing that your ancestors did. That strength, that resilience, that making new, that's in our bones.
Yeah.
And we sometimes get so far away from the essence of who we are. And then not even 5 generations, like, let's talk about hundreds, thousands, millions. Now we're talking about a tribe. We all come from a tribe. Like an indigenous tribe that sat in a circle in a community before there were politicians, actually spoke about their feelings, created with their hands, and made things from the elements, and over time that has blossomed into beautiful things. But the essence of who we are, how we're speaking, that comes from, like, they're in our bones.
Yeah.
And we're just making and creating newer versions of that, but we're bringing those roots back. And that's not to say that, you know, because there are generational traumas, and a lot I had to work through in Peru. And a big one was about male validation and giving power to men. And on my left side, which is your left side is your feminine side, I had a pain in, like, my pelvis for the longest time. And I was working through it in Peru, and I had this, at one point I had this, like, exorcism. And this dark thing came out of my body. And really it was talking about how my ancestors, the women's side, you know, I come from a line of very powerful men that are brilliant and strong, but didn't give that much power to women. So all of the women were silenced and quieted and not given an opportunity to speak, and were beautiful, but were just infatuated by their beauty. And so me here now, I'm taking that power back. I'm giving a voice to not only myself, but my ancestors and all of the women, generation to generations, on my side, but also on the world side as well. And being this woman, this powerful, fearless warrior, speaking my truth. Now, like, us speaking our truth, that's strength.
Yeah.
That's power. That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, truly.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm getting literal chills of you
Yeah.
talking about this, because just yesterday
Yeah.
I was out hiking around
Yeah.
in nature, and that's when I always feel like I'm the most spiritually connected. And I was thinking about, like, in my head, doing the little David Goggins quote, like, who's gonna carry the boats? And then I was thinking of, like, the real metaphor of that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about who's gonna carry the physical boats. Maybe it is for him, but for me, I think it's who is going to carry my family forward, who is going to carry or release the stress of the week, carry the traumas of my life, and try to eradicate them one step at a time.
Right.
And also, but really, like, for me, it comes down to carrying the family forward. And I've had a very similar experience with my parents and my family, where I had a lot of resentment towards both my mom and dad, towards the way I grew up, towards things that occurred during my childhood, and I held on to it for a really long time.
For sure.
And I'm at the place now where I have a great relationship with my mom and dad for the first time, really in years. And I just do not carry that resentment at all anymore, because I see the big picture. I see that they did the best they could, and how much of myself, the good parts of myself, include it, because you only want to blame them for the bad parts,
right?
But what about the good parts that they taught you and that they passed down to you, and they did the best that they could? And then I was thinking the exact same thing. Think about the sacrifices that they made for you, the sacrifices that their parents made for them, and going back and back and back and back. And we have to remember that in order to create the next generation and keep all those sacrifices, honor them, and keep it moving forward. Because at the end of the day, we're all searching for this purpose, and that's the only clear-cut purpose I see. There's a lot here that we can do, that we can try to find happiness and peace and experience love, and all of that I think is extremely important. But at the end of the day, I think the main purpose is to create the next generation, because we're just passing down as much as we can to the next, and hope that they can do the same as well. And just knowing that we're going to make mistakes too, but the work we're doing right now is going to help make that a lot better.
Right.
And I even think too, what you said about the darkness phase, I really had that too. Like, everything you said hit so hard, because right before I moved to New York, I had a very large trauma in my teenage years, and I didn't face it for a very long time. And it just kept coming up and up and up in my brain, in my life. Like, I couldn't run away from it. Like, I think I just tried to run away from it, and I couldn't. So finally an opportunity arose where I felt like I have to do something. So I faced it head on, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did. I had to have some of the most difficult conversations of my entire life. And I faced it head on, and then I moved to New York, and I feel like I was in like this darkness phase, but like my soul wasn't 100% dark, but I was just attracted. I had my whole room black and red. I had skeletons everywhere, like everywhere, year round. I had atomic hearts everywhere. Everything was like this dark like energy. And I was getting like more tattoos of like I got like a skeleton tattoo and this and that, and like really committed to this. And then now I'm on the flip side, where I feel like that served a purpose in that time of life, and absolutely. I had to feel that, and I had to get that depth to myself, and I had to be many different versions of myself to get to where I am now. And I have the same exact experience where now I just want to feel light and simple, and I'm attracted to like just all around light and simplicity and going back to my roots, and having like a bit of a beachy essence or energy to myself, because that's where I came from. And like just reconnecting all around with who I am, and knowing that I am actually quite light at this point in my life, and that's how I want to be and present myself. But I do feel like sometimes you have to face the darkness first. And even prior to that period, even when I was in Philadelphia, I just feel like I was really in a dark spot. maybe not as like committed to the physical aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
But I was still in a dark spot.
Yeah.
And now I just feel like it really was a 360 where now I'm just really connecting with who I am. So everything you said around that, because I've obviously seen your artistic journey. Yeah. And it's amazing and it's art, but like right now you just look like a ray of light.
Yeah. I think I had to go through that depth of darkness, and I think that's what I'm kind of like going through now is what am I going to create in this new essence? And that was something that I was struggling with a bit because all of my favorite artists are all dead, and they all died because of their mental illnesses.
Yeah.
And you know, there's one aspect of the 27 Club, and I remember just being like, how am I going to be an artist without having all of that pain and darkness? Like, what am I going to create? And I think part of my journey right now that I'm discovering, because the reason why I came back to Philadelphia was when I was in Peru. In one of the last days, we were in Chavin, which is the home of Washuma. And I had drinking the medicine, and I was on the top of this mountain, and I got a very clear download that said that, you know, I have to come back and share this wisdom, but also, you know, start a clothing collection. And like verbatim, everything just started popping out. And I think now something that I'm working through is the process of my creativity, and how, because before I dreaded, and I think a lot of people struggle with this sometimes, is not having all the skills in order to create the vision that you want to create, but realizing it's a process. But that's the whole thing, and I dreaded the process because I wanted perfection, and I wanted it now, and I wanted to be good now. And I think that process is like, you know, the other day I had this vision of something I wanted to paint, and I sat there and I looked at my sketchbook and I was like, I don't think I can draw this. Like, I don't think I can actually draw what I'm seeing in my head. And so I had to realize, I was like, okay, you'll get there. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, was a bigger metaphor of everything though.
Yeah.
Everything that's beautiful. Everything, and it comes back to nature too, which I learned so much in Peru, is, you know, one of the mountains was called Asungate, and it was called the Doctor Mountain, the Healer Mountain. And I had looked at the mountain, and he really spoke to me. He was like, my child, like, look at my essence. He was like, I have been here for thousands of years, and I just am. And people come to me for healing. And I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Look at the trees. I looked at the tree. The tree said, I just am. And how long has it taken me to grow? And it's beautiful. And we look at these mountains. We look at things that are so beautiful, and they've been and have taken thousands of years to transform. And they just are. And that's the same with us. We just are. Like, allow us to just be, and watch us transform and grow as time goes on.
Yeah. And
even a rock, it just is. And I sat on this rock, and I was there on this rock for 8 hours. I spoke to this rock for truly 8 hours, and the rock was like, you're sitting on me because your energy was attracted to me to sit on.
Mm-hmm.
You magnetize people.
Yeah.
You don't have to. All you have to do is be.
Mm-hmm.
And everything will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you need will come to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to force or to seek.
Yeah.
You know, there is that ebb and flow, like the waves, but effort and ease. But if you get to the core and you're creating from the core of your soul, everything will flow to you.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say? Something?
Yeah. I totally agree with like the energy and the attraction, and I even wanted to touch on like how we met. We just like we somehow found out each other had a connection to Ocean City, became friends, but then we never had like a single real deep conversation ever. And you would bring me around your other friends, but it was always understood like I was Gabby's friend, you know?
Yeah.
And there was some reason obviously that we were meant to connect.
Yeah.
And maybe like our souls knew something about each other that we didn't, because we never had a deep conversation. Right. And then years and years later, I remember during COVID, we sat on the steps in Philadelphia, like looking at the Delaware.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when we realized, oh my gosh, we have so much in common.
Yeah.
And we had no idea. Like when I first met you, I was deep, like the deepest into my eating disorder, like peak height of eating disorder, of alcoholism, of all of that. Yeah. But somehow, like our energy just was attracted to each other, because then we realized that we've had a very similar story, which is insane. And I've seen situations like that arise multiple other times in my life. And just trusting that sometimes like our energy does know best.
Yes, everything is energy. Mm-hmm. Everything is energy, and every single thing that happens to us, the smallest things, it's like it leads us to where we are now. Like every small thing that has ever happened to us, even like how I got here, maybe I walked, then maybe I took the subway, like, but we're here in this moment, in this direct time. All of our past brought us here. How, like, however we met, brought us here to this moment. Which is so crazy to think, but it's so like, it was actually interesting. Yesterday, I was really thinking about like letting go and just surrendering to flow, allowing myself to be in flow. And I was on the train yesterday, and there was this guy who had no headphones on, and he was sitting next to me. He was playing like a video, and it was like kind of pissing me off. And I was like,
I've seen that a lot here.
I was like, oh my God. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to let this guy just be. Like, I'm going to let him be, because, like, maybe he doesn't have headphones. Like, let me just. And I was like, eventually he'll learn maybe that he needs to wear headphones. And I'm not kidding. I let that energy go. I'm not kidding you. 3 minutes later, this woman comes up to him and was like, can you put on headphones? And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, okay. A little bit later, there was a line to go to the bathroom when I landed in New York, and I was like, oh my God, like this line, so annoying. Whatever. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? Time is time. I'm just gonna let it go.
I can't do anything.
2 minutes later, this woman comes up to me and goes, there's literally, if you walk right upstairs, there's no line at all to go to the bathroom. You can go. I was like, okay. And I was like, imagine if I just continue to surrender and let go. because nothing, I think that's the big thing is, and especially in a healing process, and especially when you're in your low points, you really think that the world and everyone and everything hates you and is against you.
Yeah.
You really, really do.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to not see that too.
And it's a horrible mindset.
It's a horrible mindset.
It only sickens yourself.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like I've learned, especially in friendships and relationships, that you cannot control someone.
No.
And you have to realize that if that person is worth having a relationship with, you have to accept them for who they are.
Yes.
There's going to be parts of everyone that maybe you wouldn't do yourself. Maybe it's not your favorite part about them. They're a human being just like you, and there's parts of myself and yourself that other people might have a hard time with, and that's just something that you have to learn to let go. And I've definitely done a lot of work on that. And then even in small situations, just calming yourself. And I always try to think, especially in New York, because you're always going to miss the subway by 2 seconds. You're always going to have this situation where immediately you want to be like, oh my God. And then I always try to think there's a bigger picture that I can't see right now. Maybe if I cross the street right now when I wanted to, but I missed it by 1 second, a car would have veered over.
Exactly.
Like there's something we don't know. Or maybe on the next block there was like a fight that I was avoiding. And there really is a reason, and that really helps me realize, like, I wasn't supposed to cross the street right now, but I just don't know why, and that's okay. And that's how I try to think of it.
Exactly, because it's like, and I think that comes with how you can start to see that outwardly is seeing that inwardly.
Yes.
And like that's like the difference. It's like, once you can allow yourself to just be, once you can allow yourself to I think one of the biggest things is trust. Trusting in yourself. Trusting in your bones, trusting that, like, I know that whatever decision I make, and also being grounded within yourself, like, I trust myself. And if you trust yourself strongly enough, you're able to see outwardly, oh, I trust in the universe too. I trust whatever is happening outside of me as well, because we're hand in hand. I'm just, like you said, I'm a small part of this big picture. And I think one of the biggest things is losing yourself completely. Like, you are nothing. Like, getting down to the root, to those breaking points where you're realizing you are nothing. To remember you are everything.
Completely detaching yourself from the ego.
I
love that. I always try to think about that. Like, we are literally a speck in the big picture. We can use our power for good. But at the end of the day, like, you cannot have this ego attached to you. It only serves negative purpose. And you can have self-love without having ego. But I even going back to the ancestry topic and the depression and attaching yourself to these labels. Oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I have depression. Like, think about how our ancestors lived, and that is our root inside of us. And then a lot of times we can create our own prison where we're in an environment where we're only looking forward to the weekend. I just want to get to the weekend so I can party. Like, my life is miserable. This is happening. That's happening. I'm only following the constructs of society. And then it's like, oh, I'm depressed. I'm only eating this food that, like, I was told to eat. And having, like, at the end of the day, I think we need to remember, like, back to the basics. Have you been outside today? Have you been with nature recently? Have you been eating food that is fueling your body properly? Have you been actually working on yourself? And that can really, really help.
Right.
Because we, like, this society that we've created for ourselves, parts of it is amazing, but parts of it we really have to watch out and take care of ourselves. Otherwise, like, I love living in the city, but I need to get out into nature.
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't take that self-care step, maybe I would start getting angry when I missed the subway or having something negative happen. Because we have to really think about, like, what were they doing that we can emulate in today's society in our own way to get in touch with our true self.
Right. Well, it's interesting because it's quite like what we were talking about before. When there's no expression, when there's no self-expression on any level, then there's suppression.
Yes.
When there's suppression, then there's depression.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That is good.
When there's no expression, we're keeping it all down. And so that's why we're in this, like, lull of what is going on? Like, why am I not happy? Why am I lethargic? We're not expressing, like, for me, this is my, like, personal thing. If I'm not playing, praying, breathing, or moving, I'm not in alignment.
Correct.
I need to be doing those things. And I think our work, what we do in this world, needs to be our play. What we do in this world, and if we do work in a more serious job, there needs to be time for play. But eventually, I think, the goal is to allow our passions in our work, because once we get in tap with our soul source and we start creating from that soul place, then our work, our play, what we're expressing actually becomes our work.
Yes.
And we can trust in that financially, supportively. But that's about trusting.
Yeah.
Because once we continue in that flow, we're like, oh, this is me. This is me. Then you start magnetizing everything that's meant for you. The places, the people, the environments, the opportunities, then they start flowing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, looking back, when I was the crazy party girl was when I was giving into, okay, I need to look like Barbie. I need to, and I've had all these ideas and always been very creative. But okay, I need to fit into this mold and I need to live my life this certain way. So then, it would all be released in the partying. And then when you actually are confident in yourself enough to do what you want and create what you want and be who you want, then you don't feel the need to have to release anything, because you've built a life that you love.
Exactly.
And not every second of your life can be pure bliss and pure happiness. But overall, you've built a life that you love and that you're proud of. And then you don't need to escape. And then on the flip side, I definitely can relate to, I didn't even mention, like, Alexander McQueen was my favorite artist too. And I back in fashion school did presentations on him and was obsessed with him and all of that. And we forget that if you get swallowed up by the darkness too much and you allow yourself to only be in the dark, that sometimes it doesn't have a great ending all the time. Throughout history, it does not have a good ending. So we have to create this balance where we can tap into that part of our soul and learn from it, but then also have a light and love to ourselves as well.
I think that's so important, and especially the balance. It's all about the balance. It really is. And I think you had mentioned something and I had a thought and I was like, oh, it's so good. Now I lost it. No, I think that the balance between who we are
Mm-hmm.
and who we were.
Mm.
And I think we like let go, like we almost want to let go of all of those versions of, you were talking about the different versions of yourself,
Yes.
and all of those different versions of ourselves are still us,
Yes.
but it's moving forward and picking up those pieces of each
Mm-hmm.
version of ourselves. And I think
Yeah.
it's also healing each version of ourselves too. And really, like, and I'm telling you, like, I basically cry every single day, whether I'm grieving a past version of myself,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm like releasing something,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many different traumas and so much different like energies that are carried in our bodies, and if we're not releasing it in one way or another,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think there's this big, and I know running is like a huge release for you.
Mm-hmm.
Running is a big release for me as well, and I think also like you were big into sports too, and
Yeah.
there was so much pressure around sports for me, and I'm sure for you as well, and it made me not enjoy sports,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually love to like move my body in an intense way.
Yeah.
And I think like there's this huge notion of moving my body, like kind of like this warrior essence.
Yes.
Like we need that like fire, and we also
100%.
need that like that water. And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, what I've noticed like on this path, like I don't even like to say like, because another thought, we all as a society in this like world, we love to label things.
Yeah.
And so for me, like on my journey, I was labeling myself because I didn't know what I was. Like at one point I was like, am I a lesbian? Am I bisexual? Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Like, because I was going through all these things, but I was like, I'm just everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like going back in this like spiritual community, sometimes there's this essence of like always love, always light, like we're always like dancing the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And no, sometimes things are hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually need that like fire in us to like to get us to move, to get us going. And going back to our ancestors, that's what they did. They were walking, they were fishing, they were hunting for actual food. They had to probably like move from one land to the other. And like I train during the week, and I'll be jumping rope, and I just like go into a meditation, and my ancestors come through in this meditation. They're like, you're finding your inner warrior through doing this.
Yes.
And these little outlets that we have, like in working out, it's so important because they build that strength for when we're doing work in the world.
Yes.
They build that fire in us, because for a long time, working out has always been quite easy for me, and I'm sure for you as well. Like it's kind of like second nature almost. But sometimes in my creative outlets, I'm like, why can I not get that fire and that essence of like, I am gonna do this in my creative outlets?
Yes.
I'm like, where is that like warrior like climbing up? And I think the more that I tap into really feeling into my body, because something I learned is your body is a book that you need to read daily. Every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I really, really try to listen to my body now and what she wants from me.
Yeah.
In a way that's more kind and more loving, because I think when you go through like so much different trauma, and in Peru, I also was working through a really big trauma that I knew deep down, but I didn't know until it came up for me, and it happened when I was super, super young. And like going through, and I lost my train of thought again.
That's okay.
What was I just saying though?
That you're going through different versions of trauma.
Yes. Going through different versions of
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Are we good?
Yeah,
okay.
I just don't know how to put my phone on
Do not disturb.
Yes, that could work.
No, but going through different versions of myself, I don't know, I lost it.
No, well, everything you were saying, I just feel like is correct. Like, you need to be the warrior. You need to be the peaceful person.
Yeah.
And that is true. Our society wants us to be fit in a box. Are you this? Are you that?
Yeah.
What is your political party?
Right.
What is your, what type of aesthetic are you? What type of style are you? And it's like, no, I'm just me. And I like this one day, I might like that one day. I might be extremely peaceful and compassionate and understanding and just in this peace state one day, and the next day I might be like ready, like have a lot of grit and be climbing a mountain.
Right.
You have to embody all these different parts of yourself in different situations, and you need all these parts of yourself.
You do.
And I think sometimes we're forced to put ourselves into a box.
We are.
And then just adapt one part of ourselves. We need to be multifaceted. We need to have all of this within ourselves to be completely whole.
Yes. It's so my belief in it. And I think we get stuck on labels sometimes because like we'll see a person and we'll see a thing and we'll immediately like give it a name.
Yeah.
And also like coming back to kind of like source and essence. There's this whole thing with like creativity and inspiration and living in like a city. I realized like the work that I was doing in London, it was me. When I went to Peru and I wasn't using my phone and I was drinking the medicine, and this was the interesting thing. Once I cleansed my whole body from like all of my traumas, but that's another thing, we're expressing our artistic abilities and how we feel through our art. So once I cleared all of the, I don't want to say gunk, I started to actually receive messages and start to get inspiration from myself. And I was like, oh, I actually am the creation of nothing. I'm actually creating things from nothing.
Yes.
And I remember I had, like, my phone was off to the side or something. I was still on the mess, and I looked at my phone, and in that moment, I felt my entire body just go, zoop, and the energy of the phone sucked me out of myself. And I was like, wow, this is a powerful thing. And I realized, I was like, every single thing that people are creating, people are wearing the same clothes. I went back. I had no idea what trends were because I wasn't on my phone for like 4 months.
Yeah.
And so I was just dressing and doing things from me. You. And when I was in the mountains, I was getting so much inspiration. I was like, this is where you get your inspiration from, yourself and nature. And I'm looking at like everything on Instagram, and you're walking around cities, there's so much art, but it's like everything is just like a one-off of something else.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly.
And I'm like, everything is kind of being copied now.
Yeah.
So and especially on Instagram.
Oh my God.
And especially in fashion, it's like, and it's like, how can we peel back the onion layers
Yes.
to our source in order for us to just, we're a seedling in the earth and we're growing. How can we go back to the seedling, be reborn, and allow ourselves to just be?
Exactly. I think overall the message of all of this is go back to the basics.
Yeah, go back to the basics.
Focus on yourself, explore yourself, grow yourself.
Yeah.
Become multifaceted, and just remember how life used to be, and go back to the basics to try to find yourself, try to find happiness.
Yeah.
And that is what I try to do. You're clearly doing it. And I'm just so happy that we were able to produce this episode and have this conversation.
So grateful.
Because, I'm just so grateful to have you in my life and be able to see you going through all of this. And we're just been on a journey.
We're continuing the journey. I'm honored.
So thank you so much for coming on and getting real.
We're always gonna get real.
So thank you, Gabby.
Thanks, Maddie.